when we talk about privilege, let's talk about what's actually happening on the inside in terms of our feeling of liberation and feeling of connection with other people. Because when we feel the joy to have the time to be able to just be with our friends and feel like family amongst them, like, to me, that's one of the greatest privileges.
Okay, love. Steven, welcome back, my friend.
So good to be back here with you, Louise.
So you all might remember Steven was on maybe 2.5 years ago or something. And right? When was that?
Yeah, we talked about COVID, I think about 2 years ago.
Yeah, that's right. And Steven's one of my most adventurous friends. He travels everywhere and does the most amazing things while he's traveling. And you were recently in Ghana, and we were having a conversation about it. And it was interesting. At the same time you were there, I met a woman who also lives there. I met her in Costa Rica. That's where her ancestors are from. She was born and lived in America her whole life. And I think she said 10 or 15 years ago, she moved to Ghana to explore her roots. And she was going on and on about how much I would love it because there's beans everywhere. And then you had said something similar. And so I thought it was interesting that Ghana was coming to me. And so as you and I were talking about it, there were just so many beautiful pieces that were emerging that I thought we should record and bring into a podcast discussion. So that's how this is happening.
Totally. Yeah, it was pretty electric just to be able to talk to you about it and especially feel into it, right? There's so much to feel into on an embodied level of what Ghana meant to me. Mm. And to set the context, I went there in 2010 with my university at the time. And I remember just being completely blown away and saying, I have never experienced anything like this in terms of feeling of connection to life. Let me tell you, Luis, it brought dance to my life, for example, in a way I'd never experienced. I was moving my body with freedom and ease that had never happened before in my life. And I thought to myself, man, I would love to come back here. And honestly, I think that this should be mandatory education for all Americans and all Europeans to just get a taste of this.
Why? What's the thing that really infused in your body that you think would really help Americans and Europeans? What is it?
Well, I think that's probably what we're going to weave together here throughout this whole session. You know, there's so many layers to that. And maybe I'll just start by just setting the context of this trip, and then we can go into kind of layer by layer what emerged. Mm-hmm. So I went there last December 2024 for about a month, and it was on an invitation from a friend of mine who I met here in Prague, who was talking about a couple different social adventure initiatives that he had been doing in Zimbabwe and a couple other countries in Africa. And he's originally from Ghana and came to study here in Czech Republic. So we got to talking, and just over our friendship, started seeing, okay, what if we collaborated on something? What if we created a little initiative? And he was saying that he's connected to a school and that he's really interested in upcycling materials in Ghana. So many people don't know that a lot of secondhand clothing and unwanted material goes to Ghana and Nigeria from Europe, from the United States. Fast fashion ends up there, and a lot of this material just ends up in the waste. So what we came up with is this idea to upcycle denim material and make backpacks and give it to a school in the Western region in Ghana. So that was the invitation, which felt so good to me to be invited to go there and also to do a collaborative project. And when I got there, you know, when we talk about the why, it was immediately for me a sense of melting into the joy and presence of just being. Seeing people, for example, when we were in the city of Kumasi, where he's from, my friend Faith is from there, it felt like being part of a family within a couple of days. Immediately, the warmth of hellos, the seeing people who were just so interested in seeing who I am, understanding where I'm coming from, why I'm there, from like a place of open-heartedness. And I started feeling my whole body come in line. And I was like, oh, wow, I forgot what this can feel like. because I'm so in my head in so many of my interactions with people here in Europe. And to go there and, for example, wake up in the morning and leave the house and have physical contact with maybe 10 people within the first 10 minutes. Oh, how luxurious that was to
What does that mean?
feel that.
Tell us, what does physical contact look like in this case?
So walking out of the front door in Kumasi, and so just seeing like 4 children right there who by day 3 are running up to me and saying, Uncle Steven, and wanting to play some soccer together. It's going down to the local market, which is, maybe a 1-minute walk away, and having a great conversation with 3 people along the way, and, giving each other handshakes, high fives, good morning, a hug. Like, oh, wow, this is very unusual to me. When I leave my house here in the city of Prague, I barely make eye contact with almost anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this body, this human body, is searching for cues in any place of belonging. Is it safe here? Do I belong? Am I accepted? And what I notice is it can go beyond that. Am I celebrated? Am I celebrated? And am I inspired also, of course, to celebrate the people around me? And
would you say,
celebrate life? Yeah.
Yeah, is this like a Ghanaian thing, or is it because you were a traveler there and they were honoring you as someone visiting?
This is such a good question. I asked myself that too, right? And I think there's maybe more curiosity seeing me as a lighter skinned person, like, oh, what are you doing here? Oh, Bruni, which is the name for a foreigner there. Mm-hmm. And actually what they do, and I love this, the relational pronouns that are used over there. Everyone's called, like I said, Uncle Steven, they were calling me, or they call each other, brother, sister, uncle, auntie. And that's for everybody. I started noticing people saying, oh, my sister's giving birth tomorrow. Oh, your sister's giving birth tomorrow. I find out, 20 minutes later in the conversation, it's not a biological sister.
Yeah.
So people might have come to me and been curious, hey, what's your deal? But because I was with friends that I made over time there who are Ghanaian, I saw how people were interacting with them too. And it was very similar. Mm-hmm. It was just this abundance of giving and receiving, whether it's on touch, on just vibing, which it sounds almost strange to say, like, just vibing. What does that actually mean? It's like, it's being with another person, and the content of the conversation isn't as important as how you just feel being in each other's presence.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love the relational pronoun thing because a lot of times if I meet a Puerto Rican, they'll call me Primo, which means cousin. And so it's like whether we are actually cousins, by blood in a direct way, or we just have Puerto Rican ancestry that we connect to. They're like, Primo, hey, Primo, or hey, cuz. And so there's this instant sense of, oh, we belong to each other. And they don't care. What's interesting, I keep finding what's fascinating about Puerto Ricans in particular, they don't really care about racial dynamics. So they know I'm Puerto Rican because of my name. They don't care how light my skin is. I've been friends with some Puerto Ricans that are like Caribbean Puerto Ricans, so very dark skin, and I'm still Primo. It's just how it shows up because of the lineage. And so there's something about that, using a pronoun or a name for someone that consistently says your family, like we are connected, we belong to each other. It completely changes the experience of being in a place, doesn't it?
It really does. It's those little linguistic things that make a big difference. And it's the little touch points. Like I said, just a little high five with somebody. How much that just tells the body, hey, I'm wanted here. I'm seen here.
Mm-hmm. It's reminded me of when we moved to Woodstock. When we first visited Woodstock and when we moved to Woodstock in upstate New York, I remember it being so strange because I would go into stores, people that I got to know who owned the stores, and everyone would greet me with a kiss and a hug. And I never had that anywhere in my life. And I'd be driving on the road. I'm sure you remember this, especially in the old days before it got really popular up here. You'd be driving and people in their cars, as they passed you, would wave through the windshield at you. And it was just this beautiful sense of touching into each other, seeing each other as a common relative that stitched this fabric of community and belonging. And when you talk about the touch quota, I had just come from Brooklyn, where when you talk about your experience in the Czech Republic, no eye contact, everyone looking at phones, no one touching. If you touched on the subway, oh, sorry, excuse me. But then being in Woodstock with these people, like hugging, kissing, full on the lips, just this kind of like, hey, you're family now because you live in this little mountain town with us. There's something so incredibly settling about that. And I guess I wonder, how did it feel coming back from that? Did you feel a contrast of loneliness? Did you feel a contrast of unbelonging? I'm just curious how that settled with you.
Yeah, so I'll say, I think an important point, what you bring up with Woodstock, right? Being a smaller town, I think this kind of touch point is still something that is experienced in a lot of European places, a lot of American places, in smaller towns. But in cities, it's changed so much. So I was asking myself, well, what about Ghana kept that relational aspect alive, even in a city of millions of people? And a big part of it is, I think, more relational economics, because where we were, for example, it's actually this little industrial part of the city that was created by the president Kwame Nkrumah. And right there, you have essentially a microcosm of the entire society. So you have your mechanic there, you have the person who grinds cassava, you have this shop owner, the lumber maker, and you know all of them. You know their kids. You see them every single day right outside your house. The person who was making the backpacks that we were using lived literally next door to where I was staying. I shared a wall with him. So saw him first thing in the morning, seeing the workshop where he's making the bags. I think that is a big thing that is missing when I walk outside here, right? When I go to a Walmart in the United States, or I go to the supermarket here, I don't necessarily have a personal relationship. And that's the things we're doing so much in cities is we're consuming a coffee, consuming something at the supermarket. But where is the relationship? And so, yes, it did feel incredibly lonely when I got back here. And I noticed when I walked around, the sensation of I'm back up here and noticing people interacting from head to head. And it became way more clear to me that that was happening after I experienced what the full body feeling can be like.
Which is an interesting dynamic, because I have questions with identity and privilege coming up, but it's interesting around this because this is where we get into identity a bit, because your ethnic identity is you're Czech. So you're actually in a place where most people around you reflect you visibly, right? You look the same skin tone, literally the same lineage and bloodline. And then here you are in a place where you don't look like the people that live there. You don't share a bloodline. You don't have the same lineage, yet you felt more like family with them than even around your own, quote, people. I find that interesting.
Yeah, and as you say that, it brings up grief for me. And I'm not the only Czech person to feel that. There's wounding here. I carry that intergenerational wounding around trust that happened during communism here, that happened during Nazi occupation, where many people couldn't trust their best friends. And so it created these divisions in society. And it goes a lot deeper than that. Austro-Hungarian rule here for 450 years, where there was just this sense that I don't know if I can actually be myself in society and stand up as my own unique individual and not get hammered down for that. And so to go to a place and just feel like, okay, like I can just show my joy. I can be in this place where we don't need to bond over complaining, because that's a safe thing to bond over here. Right? Despite most things working super well, us having a pretty high standard of living, a lot of people find a lot to be upset about. And then I go to Ghana and I see people have much less in terms of physical, wealth. This neighborhood I'm telling you about, the water there. I mean, it was sad to see like how polluted this water was, and to find out that people downstream are drinking that water, right? And so on a physical level, you would think, or I would think, well, okay, this will be a lot to complain about. Yet what I noticed was just a lot of people being so present with just existing and enjoying dance, enjoying the sunshine. And I started thinking, well, what is going, it's okay, we have the intergenerational trauma thing. Maybe it's something also with the tropics that,
Mhm.
my ancestors grew up in a place where when winter comes, like you better be ready because we're talking scarcity. We're talking cold and food is not available. Whereas in Ghana, like even if you don't have very much money, cassava plants will be growing and you can harvest those roots and you can have food. So
I
what does
found
that
that
do to
interesting.
urgency? Urgency seems like it goes down in that situation.
Yeah, I had visited Iceland recently, and an Icelandic man there was driving us and giving us tours, and we became friends with him. And he would keep saying, "You think people are civilized, you think we are a civilized group, but just see what happens when there isn't any food. We become like animals." And I was thinking about how a lot of northern climates they've dealt with that animalistic urge coming up in a way of separating themselves from other people, like not trusting, fighting, being in survival response because of these 6 to 8, sometimes 9 months of winter and not having anything to grow. And when I go to much warmer countries, much warmer climates, where there tends to be more poverty comparatively when it comes to, financial, like money poverty, but they don't have the same kind of land poverty. They're growing their own food. They have a connection to the land. They have an abundance of just simple, healthy food that grows literally right outside their door. So the quote impoverished people of these countries, in a way, have privileges that these other countries that are more developed don't have. I've been thinking about that for years. Especially, I remember one time a good friend of mine and I did a collaboration together. We did a workshop on grief, and she's an African American woman, and she was asked by someone in the crowd, "How do you deal with the grief of being Black in America and being underprivileged?" Now, she took offense to that because she's not underprivileged, but she was assumed to be because of her skin tone, just because of whatever political ideas this person had been fed or believed or experienced even at some point. And she used this example of her stepfather, and she was saying, "Well, my stepfather, who I adore, who raised me, grew up in the tropics, extremely poor. They could barely afford band-aids or food or anything, to take care of themselves." And she said, yet he knew how to speak to the land. He ate healthier food than any of us did, and he had a healthier body than people in developed countries. And so I've always been interested in this American, um, what's the word I want to call it? We have this habit of naming other people. So like I'm deciding that you're underprivileged because you don't have a life I have. But tell me what the Ghanaians taught you about privilege, how they see themselves compared to Americans.
Mhm. I love this topic, and we've talked about this on several occasions, right? Is dissecting what does privilege actually mean. And I got schooled a bit over there because I came in and I threw out the word privilege with the sort of assumption I'm the privileged one here. And I said something that was relatively politically correct. And a couple of my friends were like, hold on a second. I'm going to challenge you on that. And I was great. Please. I'm really excited to hear this. And what came out was really me checking again and coming to awareness of like, what are we actually talking about here? And are we getting in our heads creating this idea of just monolithic privilege, underprivileged, oppressed, oppressor? And they were like, look, let's look at American society. Let's look at European society. So many people have lost complete touch with their bodies, lost complete touch with having a faith in something greater than themselves. And I remember one of them said, look, this is a country where a lot of people really believe in God, and God sets the sort of ideal that you want to work towards in your life. And you have a life purpose. You feel connected to something bigger. And frankly, and this is a country right now that I live in is one of the most atheist countries in the world. And saying, well, if you don't have connection, whatever it is, God or nature or something like this, that you believe in, what is the purpose that you're going for? And in the United States, I think in a lot of ways, the new God that's been instilled is money, is the story that we need more. And so how privileged is that? when, instead of going out and dancing with our neighbors and enjoying a sunset together, it's hustle and grind, hustle and grind. I need to prove myself. And there's so many layers in which this shows up. Scarcity, internalized policing, the ways we enforce rules within ourselves and within others. I felt so free when I navigate. Like, society is an organized, chaotic mess there. Just try driving down the road, and it is a wild adventure beyond like your dreams. And not to glorify it. It takes 6 hours to get from Accra to Kumasi, and it's only like 200 kilometers. But there is like an organic flow there that is happening that is so much less controlled. We have so much control. We're going from kind of rule to rule here in Europe in many ways. And it has efficiency benefits. But when we talk about privilege, let's talk about what's actually happening on the inside in terms of our feeling of liberation and feeling of connection with other people. Because when we feel the joy to have the time to be able to just be with our friends and feel like family amongst them, like, to me, that's one of the greatest privileges.
As you're saying it, I'm almost getting a sense of, when we say privilege, I think what we really mean is convenience. And I don't know if they're the same thing. Like, it's convenient to have roads laid out in a very specific way, so I'll be there in 20 minutes. There's something convenient about that. Or it's convenient to know I can buy something on Amazon, it will come tomorrow. I don't know who slaved over it. I don't know who labored over it. I don't know who was mistreated or treated well because of it, but it's convenient. But I find that convenience separates us from the relationship to the land and each other, because, as you know, relationships aren't convenient. Like, they're messy, and they're organic, and they're mysterious, and they're shocking, and they take time. I think of you driving that 6-hour road, that's like a relational experience to me. Even as I'm imagining the road being created in a relational way to follow the land instead of a cut through something to get somewhere really quick. So I just wonder how much convenience plays in with this conversation, and how we confuse privilege for convenience.
The 6-hour journey is definitely a relationship. I won't forget that journey. I mean, that is a bumpy, dusty road in many ways. But I remember it had a richness to it. It did, an experiential richness. And I think you're absolutely right. Convenience, it shows what the values of a society are, right? And in many ways, that is a privilege, to have the convenience to click on a button and in 2 hours, this item shows up. Absolutely. Physically so privileged. And I'll tell you what else is in there. And I think this is one of the biggest privileges we have, is the privilege of choice. I got to choose to go to Ghana and leave Ghana, and many Ghanaians can't. Right? There's many Ghanaians who work their asses off to get really good at microbiology, at soccer, at many different things. And I was like, wow, the level of talent and skill is amazing. Yet they're not going to get the opportunities in Ghana. And they don't just get to say, I just want to get a visa to the United States. So this also opened my eyes to, okay, so what privileges do we really have? And how do we use those?
I'm just feeling it with you, because I'm feeling I have the belief that everything's a privilege. Everything you don't think about is a privilege. And so I think about when the Ghanaians and your friends there are saying to you, we're actually more privileged than you because we have relationships and laughter and time, and we have this food. And so that is a privilege. They don't have to think about that. That's just embedded in their life, something that you and I don't even have to that level. And then there's this other privilege we're bringing in of, I can travel. I live in a country where I have a lot more financial opportunity. And so when I'm just hearing these things, I just wonder which are the privileges we're valuing, right? That's what I'm hearing you say. Like, as a society and even as an individual, which privileges do I value? And how do I use the privilege of convenience or choice to create these other cultures where I live, where there's much more relational privilege, where we're privileged to love and trust each other and be connected. That's an incredible privilege, to be in a village where you can hug 20 people and call them auntie. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it? Mm-hmm. But it redesigns our idea of privilege, because in the American mindset, privilege is so much about, it's so capitalistic, and it's so much about material. I even think of things like insurance and such. like what we experience as privileges, or what everyone should have, is really kind of this bureaucratic system divorced of nature, whether you like it or not. Whereas I've always personally been kind of chasing the privilege of more impoverished countries and people, which are like, they know the land, they know how to be humbled by it, and they know each other. And I always think that, to me, is what I've always valued much more than any of these man-made ideas of what I should have or what I shouldn't have. And I guess I'll pause there for a moment just to hear anything else coming up for you before I ask something else.
Yeah. Well, I think it is a good moment to pause and really feel into the body what this brings up, this conversation, for people listening, because this is such a charged topic for many people. And I think that one of the big shadows that is being illuminated in this whole conversation is that it stays in the head. Really, we keep thinking, what is privilege, what is not, and how do I use my male privilege, what does it look, right? And it misses out that, like, what happens when we just get in embodied relationship to each other, just be here with each other, human to human, and realize there's an entire ecosystem that is so complicated. I'm the oppressor in this regard, this regard, this regard. I'm the oppressed in this regard. I'm privileged in here, I'm underprivileged. And to just open to that felt experience, I think really does help us move the conversation forward and make it more relational, more real.
Mm-hmm. Even when you're saying it, I'm feeling it in my belly. I'm just getting this sense of privilege being relative and relational. It has to with time and place. Like, in this certain space, I have these privileges. In this certain space, I don't. And it's constantly fluctuating. And so the embodiment actually shows me, well, what space am I in right now? And what are my beautiful choices and privileges I should have gratitude for, and like love and invoke, and then share that the best I can with people around me. Yeah. So part of this privilege for me was the presidential piece, how they are with elections. I was like, whoa, this is, what you told me was incredible. So tell me again so everyone can hear it.
Wow.
How do they celebrate loss and win?
Yeah. Wow. This was an unexpected gift of being there during a presidential election. And one of the first things I saw in the capital city, in Accra, was I saw these groups of people, hundreds and hundreds of people, running and singing and dancing. It's like, what's going on with this? And they were like, hey, this is how we promote elections. This is how people say, come out and vote for our party because we're fun, we're enjoying life. Wow, that is very beautiful to see, like this energy, this engagement. So like that's cool. And then the days came up to the election, and the election happens, and then a winner was decided, which was so interesting to then see, okay, so how do people react to, a new power coming in? You have in this neighborhood in Kumasi I was talking about, you have some people supporting one party, the NPP, and some people supporting the NDC, which was the opposition party. They ended up winning. And the day after, I started talking to some people, and everyone was just like excited and celebrating. Like, we're going to have a peaceful transfer of power. And I went to the market there, and I see these women just dancing and blowing on these horns, and they're just having the time of their lives. And I'm like, okay, that's what it looks like when, your party wins. And then my friend that I was with, Emmanuel, who makes those backpacks that we were giving to the kids, he said, oh, no, that was actually the party that lost. And when he said that, something just broke inside of me, because I'm so used to the American political system where it's, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I want my party to win, and the other party is wrong. To going there and just being like, what in the hell is going on with this? So I started asking people, like, what's the deal? And they said, look, at the end of the day, you're going to have one president or the other. We're all Ghanaians. And what matters more is that we stay happy and we enjoy our lives here. Each president is going to bring some level of corruption. We all know that. And you know what? Like, it's not gonna be feasible for you to be upset at the people who are for the other party, because those are your aunties and your uncles and your mamas and your dads, you know? Those are the people who raised your ass. That's the woman at the market 50 meters away that I was telling you about, that I went and said good morning to every day. Are you going to wreck that relationship because your identity around politics is more important? Not there. It was so liberating to hear that.
You're teaching me what I've been teaching. Like, you're showing me where it shows up when I teach about polarity with politics and divisiveness, and it can only happen when there aren't relationships intact. So like what I always say to someone, if there's a hate or polarity against a certain group, can only exist if that group is a myth. If they are a story that is told to you and not someone who lives in your heart. Because the way you just said that, if my auntie who raised me, who cooked me food, who walked me to school, who picked me up when I fell and like broke my lip, broke my lip open, when that person votes for someone I don't like, I still have a relationship to her. There's this central place in my heart where she lives that no belief system will waver. That lives there, that is still, that is centered, that is rooted in me. And then belief is separate from the person. And I think that's really important. I once had a woman on my podcast named April Harder way back in 2020, and she talked a lot about narcissism and racism and the connection between the two. And the one thing she would teach is, she would say, you can't have racism survive when there's relationships. So whenever you have any kind of phobia, or you're against a certain group or a certain lifestyle, when you make a relationship with that person that has this thing you're against, you will find yourself softening with them, because relationship emerges people regardless of belief. So I just love that there's a country that's practicing this. There's a large collective group of people that are able to celebrate the wins of their brothers and sisters, even though it's their loss. And to see, talk about power. I think it's amazing how in America we believe we have such little power, that the president matters, that the president decides if we're allowed to like each other or not. Rather than what I'm hearing Ghanaians saying is like, they can be corrupt, we're going to stay tight. And that's so powerful to me.
Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna bring this back to privilege, is that this is actually a consequence of the privilege as Americans, that we could just sit around and contemplate this stuff and get so wrapped up in the head game of it.
Yes.
That in itself is a big privilege. Whereas when you're on the ground in Kumasi, in some of these other towns, you don't have the time to be, no way. You're in a situation where you all need each other. That's what the relational economy is about. And that becomes more important than having the time and space to just go into these, mental exercises around if somebody is or isn't part of my tribe.
Spot on. Camille and I always say to people, if you can sit around being worried about something, you're safe. like nothing's happening to you in that moment, because you have time to sit and contemplate and think about what's wrong with your life or the world or the future. It's a literal signal that you're actually okay right now. Because when you're in an actual crisis, there's no time to even think about pain. You're just trying to survive. And I think that's what I love about the working class. And I grew up in the working class. I was a working class most of my life. I still work, so I'm technically working class. I'm just more upper than I've ever been. But I was lower working class for most of my adult life. And I felt that in those environments, what you're bringing up here. We all had to go to that corner store to get a paycheck, and we didn't care what each other's sexualities were, what their races were, what their political beliefs, their religions, because what bound us was the relational economy. It's like, we have to get through this 8 to 10 hour shift, making like $7 an hour. We are bound as family through this shared experience, and it just transcended all these other ideologies and belief systems, because we didn't have time to sit back and watch videos about why this person's bad. We were in the thick of it together. They're trying to survive, and that's a privilege too of its own. It's a privilege to not have the convenience to be able to be told that someone's bad. Even
I love that. We didn't have the time to watch videos about why this person's bad. That just summarized it pretty well there.
That's my experience. That's right.
Wow. Yeah.
So let's bring in the felt sense of this a bit.
Yeah.
right? Like how it affects the nervous system, the body, the senses. What did you notice? Because I always see the body as this, my gosh, like the earth itself with endless dormant seeds. You know, when we think about epigenetics, we talk
Mm.
about how the genetic sequences change and shift and evolve and transform based on if you're eating broccoli or potato chips. But they also evolve based on or transform or shift based on, am I getting sunlight or not? Am I living around plants or not? Am I getting fresh air or not? So environment, as much as food and experiences, will change your genetics as well, and not over the course of decades, but pretty quickly. And so I wonder what seeds in you were able to unfold and awaken being in that kind of environment. What did you notice about yourself and your body?
Mm. Wow. I love that question. I would say one of the biggest things is I noticed my heart, the felt experience of my heart expanding, warmth there, actual warmth in my chest. I could feel my spine loosening. I've noticed I've had tightness in my spine for a couple of years now, just like my back has been stiff and it just was loosening up. I noticed my laughter changed, my smile, just it illuminated because I saw it illuminating all around me just by osmosis. And this is what I kept saying is I was like, they say a smile can light up a room, but damn, a Ghanaian smile lights up the universe. Like I felt it so intensely. And when everyone is singing and dancing together and there's that overwhelming sense of like, wow, my body is actually shifting as a result of this. That's what clicked for me is that's what travel is actually, as opposed to being a tourist. I mean, in a way, yes, I'm still a tourist, but to me, like tourism is like a consumptive experience, whereas travel is like I go somewhere and I become someone different because that place informs my body system. And so tension was leaving my body, like I said, those few places, and I actually started feeling more turned on by life. Like I felt held in this like juicy, gooey deliciousness of life. And it was like, I feel it right now. It's like going up my spine. I just feel this like expansion and like this deep desire to live, like this, this knack for life, this taste for life. That's what was like really awakened for me.
You're turning me on right now, Steven. Just hearing this, I feel like in my heart, and my whole body. What I really felt was this. Have you read Braiding Sweetgrass?
I haven't read the whole book, no, but I know some of it. Yeah.
So there's a section in Braiding Sweetgrass called Becoming Indigenous to a Place. And that's what I hear you describing. And it's so nice to hear that because Eamon and I talk about this all the time with each other when we're traveling. We never feel like tourists. We completely avoid anything that we're told to do as tourists. And we usually hang out with the locals, just like you do, and then go to the local places and kind of really feel the land in that way. And it does something to your body. It's like, at least me, my nervous system very quickly adapts to where I am. So within a couple of days, I forget that I'm even from America, or I forget that I have a house in New York. I'm just kind of like, no, this is where I am right now. And I don't even know what came before me because I'm so infused with the soil and the air and the language and the smells and the food. And I think that's a magic of travel, you know, the privilege to be able to travel. Then the magic we get from it is what it can awaken in us when we become the place we're in, instead of going to kind of like use the place or I don't know, buy things from the place. I don't know why else anyone would travel, but it just seems like to go and to infuse my toes into the soil of where I'm going, or the freezing Arctic Ocean, you know, wherever it is I'm going. It lights me up so much. And I guess I want to know, like, what's the flavor of Ghana for you? Like when you think about it, like when you taste it, when you feel it, like what's the vibration that was really just specifically Ghanaian out of? Because you've been all over the world. Like, what's different about this place?
I love this becoming indigenous to a place. That how quickly it can happen is incredible to me. It's amazing about the human body that we can do that. As human animals, we become part of the ecosystem. And the flavor of Ghana to me is like if you took the sun and just a little piece of that and just put it in your heart and felt it shine rays all the way down into your toes.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel the joy of that. And this is not a joy about bypassing the challenges. I don't want to like draw a picture. Like there are a lot of challenges that we can name in Ghana, but to be on the vibration of joy and connection and to still feel reverberations of that. These days, I still get texts from my friends that I made there who are checking in on me. Hey, how you doing? What's going on there? This is what's happening in Ghana. A Bolt driver that I had is like joyfully texting me these like wise texts. I'm like, there's just so much joy of sharing. And you know what it is? It's joy and it's abundance, actually.
I hear abundance.
Actual abundance, right? What we think is abundance, right? Is, oh, I can go buy something more on Amazon. Many times people would think that financial abundance, right, is what we have overcoupled. But when we uncouple that and we say, what is abundance of the soul? That's the flavor.
I feel that it's like in that abundance of the soul is what makes people like this so generous with like sharing and generous with touching and generous with treating you like family and then texting you for months afterwards about like wise things or what's going on or checking in. That's an abundance. There's so much to offer. There's this generosity flowing out. That's really beautiful. I also wanted to ask, we have a couple minutes, this piece too about climate. Because I found the same difference of how the animal body shifts based on the temperature and the climate. And so what's the pace difference for you in Ghana compared to the Czech Republic?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the pace is just, let's just remove urgency. Urgency, just take that out of the equation and let time flow. Let time flow as according to not the clock, but to the experience that is happening. And frankly, it was difficult at times because I say to my friend, hey, let's meet up at 3. 3 o'clock comes and goes and we haven't met up yet. So I had to switch a little bit, right? But when we take away urgency, there's something that is really gained. So I think that's one of the maybe biggest things. Another thing is, maybe that's the biggest thing. Like
that's a big thing.
That's honestly
not a small thing.
Yeah.
So the whole relationship to time is completely different.
Completely different. Time and space are different. Yeah. And that changes everything, right? Time is such a big factor of how we experience life.
I remember my friend and colleague Amber McSeal talking about how there's a specific group of people in Africa that when they have a party, it doesn't start at 7 o'clock. It starts when the last person gets there. So if there's 30 people that are supposed to be at this party, until the 30th has arrived, the party hasn't begun. And that's just another example of a difference of relating to time and time as a place instead of time as this kind of thing of 3, 4, 5, but as a place, as a felt sense, you know, and I'm imagining a lot of that has to do, even when we're talking about climate, has to do with the bodies still being attached to the sun and moon, not being as cognitive with things like 11:30 p.m., but more like a felt sense of where's the sun in the sky. Or, you know, how cool is it getting in the evening right now? Or am I hungry? Like kind of these somatic cues of time instead of cognitive. Was any of that your experience as well?
100%. Yeah. Somatic cues of letting that be the driving force rather than, and the word control came to my mind is because urgency, I think oftentimes leads to control. I need to create something or make it happen. Much less of that. And so it's whether it's walking down the street and just the experience is just person by person and there's space for that. Mm-hmm. It just, or the just, hey, today what we're going to do is just, you know, we're going to go and have this meeting and it might take 5 or 6 hours and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Thank you. Thank you for coming here and sharing some of your beautiful travel experience with us, because I think a place like Ghana can teach so many of us that live in our heads how to play with getting into the body and being more relational. And And closing on that, what I get from this conversation is like, oh, I want to invoke that here. I don't want to wait till I go to Ghana to experience that. I want to let Ghana teach me, right? How have you been invoking it in the Czech Republic?
I love what you were saying is kind of reminding me of ecosystem design. Like, how do we, on a micro scale, create this around us, right? Mm-hmm. So which are the people that I want to bring into this sphere and have shared meals together? Share just time and space, slow things down. Maybe how do I want to be more relational to the people in my neighborhood that I go and purchase things from? That's actually been something I've been working on. How do I be the one to initiate and just smile, even though it's really uncomfortable to do that? Mm-hmm. And then also, how do I relate to these things like inputs, like media and stuff like that, and try to keep prioritizing the people in my life here physically, and saying like, hey, what if we built, this vision of just enjoying each other's company? And that has actually been working slowly here with few people here and there. And recognizing, that even though it's difficult sometimes to come back to a culture that feels a lot more disconnected, to see that, again, my privilege is choice. I get to choose to be here. I could choose to be somewhere else. And so what am I going to do with that privilege of choice? Rather than become a victim of the place I'm in, say, okay, how do I really connect with the land here? How do I invite others to go do that with me and get that nourishment together?
Yeah, it's interesting because I also imagine the opposite could be true, where if I don't have the privilege of leaving, then I must commit to making relationships. I'm wondering how much of that is true for certain places and people, and even in their relationships with others. That interests me.
It's a good point, and shows that there's always two sides of this idea of privilege, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have the choice to choose, it might necessitate creativity in doing that thing. But if you have the privilege, and you choose and you become conscious of it, then you can do amazing things with that. But then again, there's no need to. So it could be easy to fall into the trap and become a victim to that situation.
Well, I want to close with one more thing that came up for me when you were talking, especially for specifically Americans listening, but maybe anyone around the world. But in America in particular, we really love box stores, and we have these kind of like shopping malls and plazas and these suburban sprawl places where there's kind of like a development housing where people are living, but they don't really talk to their neighbors or just living there. Then they drive really far to a bunch of stores and they go home, or they go on Amazon. And I know what's really changed my life is only living in places that have a working main street, and only visiting places that have a working main street. And that's kind of one of my favorite things, is like one of my criteria of where I'm going to live or where I'm going to travel. Whether it's domestic, if I'm traveling in the US or I'm traveling outside of it, we always stay either on or right near wherever the working main street is, because that's the culture. That's where you meet the person at the hardware store, and that's where you meet the bread maker, and in Woodstock, the candle maker, and that's where you go get your groceries, and you literally start to get the vibration of that little chunk of earth that you're visiting or sitting on. And it's so different, isn't it, than being in a place where it's a bunch of corporations have bought these giant buildings, and you're kind of walking through these plazas. No one really wants to be there. They have to be there for money. It's different than when you're in a neighborhood and there's kind of a working main street. And so I've just found, for me, over the last 20 years or so, coming out of growing up in suburban sprawl where it's so disconnected, and going into the main street kind of older American, and especially village-based living, where everything is in a concentrated place, and you're meeting each person that's making the product you're going to put in your body or eat or put in your home. There's just something so beautifully relational about that. And so when you were speaking, I was really feeling like, oh, that's why I do this. It feels so nice to be part of that.
And it's a beautiful, actionable thing people can do, is find the joy in choosing to cultivate relational economics in one's life. I think that's such a beautiful aim and a beautiful practice.
Well, my beautiful friend, thank you. Thanks for being here. I love you so much. And thanks for teaching and sharing with us.
Love you too, Luis. So good being here with you.
Thank you for watching today's episode. Please Please like and subscribe if you found it useful, and let me know in the comments what you want me to cover next. I have developed a 4-week self-paced course that takes 18 years of my personal and professional experience and puts it into one place where you can easily and quickly learn the foundations of recovering from stress and trauma. How does the food you eat affect your stress levels? How do the relationships in your life create stress or peace? How does the relationship you have with your body allow you to feel happier and more settled? I will cover all this and so much more in this 4-week self-paced course. And the best part, it's self-paced. You don't have to sign up at a certain date or finish it at a certain time. It's yours for life, and it's waiting there for you when you're ready to finish it. Throughout this course, I'll be teaching you philosophies and practices that combine my 3 favorite modalities: somatic experiencing, embodied parts work, and nutrition. For more information on this course, click on the link in my episode details.
Getting there, it was just, I could tell something special was about to happen.
There's just something about in-person retreats that just doesn't compare to online space.
Minla is outstandingly beautiful. Why not be there with Luis and his team?
My body knew that something intense was going to happen in the most beautiful way.
It was all about getting what each and every one of us needed and what the community needed.
My biggest takeaway is that I got introduced to myself.
We're just a bunch of misfits trying to find community with one another, and that's where my heart just blasted open because I felt like seen, and yeah, it was beautiful. I loved it.
Oh, and I forgot to mention something very important. I'm offering a $700 discount for anyone who registers before April 15th because this is our last US-based HLN team retreat until 2027. In 2026, we'll be doing this in Europe. So if you want to get in this year in upstate New York, in America, please visit holisticlifenavigation.com, click on events, find the retreat, and when you go to the registration page, make sure you type in the discount code HLN700. And as long as it's before April 15th, you get $700 off your entire purchase. So check the calendar right now, and if it's before April 15th, go register, enjoy the discount, and I cannot wait to see you there.